So thank you for joining today's webinar. The topic of today's webinar is bundling. As you all know, bundling is a core element of the WFSN strategy. Bundling of services is providing participants with at least 2 of 3 core service areas. Bundling can be achieved through a number of strategies that you'll hear more about later from today's panelists. But before we get started with the webinar, I just have a few housekeeping reminders that I'd like to go over. So as you should now know, you'll receive feedback on your draft implementation plans by December 23rd. We've also set a new deadline for the final implementation plan, which will be January 31st. And then finally, we just are asking for you to save the date for DREAM, which is Achieving the Dreams Annual Institute on Student Success. And that'll be from February 17th to the 20th in Baltimore, Maryland. Each WFSN CC college will receive 2 comp registrations to the convening. We'll be holding an all-day event for the colleges on February 19th. And more details will be coming in an email from the WFSN email account this week, so please be on the lookout for that. And so now I'd just like to introduce the Achieving the Dream staff on today's call. And we have Cindy Lenhart, the Vice President of Community College Relations, Julian Haynes, the Associate Director of Programs and Policy, and then myself, Elissa Sheldneck, I'm an Assistant Director of Programs. And so I'm very excited to introduce today's webinar panelist. It's Ann Lyn Hall. She is the Executive Director of CNM Connect at Central New Mexico Community College. We're very excited to have her on the webinar. For those of you who've seen her speak recently or perhaps at the class convening a couple weeks ago, you'll know that she's a great panelist and presenter, so we're very pleased to have her. So I'm going to turn over the reins to Ann Lyn so she can talk more about bundling with you today.
Hi, you all. I hope you're having a really lovely day. It's raining here in Albuquerque, and we are super excited about that because when you're in the desert and anytime it rains, you do a lovely dance of joy. Today, what I am going to be talking about is bundling, and I titled it, What Is It Anyways? Because for me, we started this work in about 2006, and it was probably 3 or 4 years into the work, and people were talking about bundling, and I still wasn't totally sure what it meant. And so I just want to fess up about that. And so today I want to spend a little time looking at some definitions of what bundling is, and then looking at some specific examples of how we've bundled services at Central New Mexico Community College. Well, for me, the first word that comes to bundling that comes to mind is I think about my cable bill. That I can get my phone and my cable and my internet all bundled together, and so that's sort of the first thing that comes to my mind around bundling. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the definition. My slides are moving a little bit slowly. Elisa talked about bundling as being having students receive 2 or 3 of the core service areas, and so I have the 3 core service areas on the right-hand side. The part that I want to highlight in this definition is an intentional plan and mechanisms in which we allow students to connect to those 2 or 3 core areas. And so when I look at these areas, community colleges, our bread and butter is education and employment. That's what we do. And so that's a super easy core area for us to be able to bundle with something else. Income and work supports is language that community colleges aren't super familiar with. For the most part, but I think about financial aid and scholarships as something that we're very used to providing, but fits into that chunk. Benefits access is new for many colleges, and tax preparation is sometimes new for colleges. The other area is around financial services and asset building. I think about at community colleges how often conversations with students actually revolve around money, and so how do we support our staff to have some conversations about money in very different ways than what they've had before. I wanted to just show you this slide, not so much to go over all of the different services that we offer through CNM Connect, but this image of puzzle pieces. And for me, the idea around bundling is how do we put different pieces of what a student needs to be successful together in a meaningful way that makes sense to the students for what they need. And I don't believe that there's any one service that sort of meets the needs for all students, but when we put together a comprehensive set of services that's designed specifically for that student, that certainly supports students being more successful. So this image of puzzle pieces helps me as I think about bundling. And then I pulled, I'm breaking all the rules for doing presentations with how many words I have on a slide. I totally know that. I pulled this from the WFSN strategy guide, and I highlighted words that I thought were really important to think about bundling. So the word intentional and integration, I think, are really critical as we think about bundling, that we think about what do students really need and how do we provide those services in an integrated and intentional fashion. The next set of bold words are tailored pathway, or an identified set of services in a specified period of time. And so you all have been working on your plans and have been thinking a lot about the services that you're offering, and today we're thinking about how do we bundle those services together, and what does that really mean? In the definitions from WFSN, there was also some words around sequencing and timing, and so it might not be that you provide two services at the same time. It might be looking at how you sequence those in a different kind of way to support students. But it might be that they come at the exact same time as well. So why would we think about bundling? And I have a picture of one of our CNM graduates. And I've been thinking a lot lately about our students' expectations of us. And when I walk across campus, students see me with my CNM name tag on, and they stop me and ask questions, and they have an expectation that I'm going to be able to help them no matter what the challenges that they're facing. And so they don't really care what department I'm from or what responsibilities I have or even what training I've had. They have an expectation that as an employee of the college that I'm going to be able to help them. And so our students have these high expectations, and so how do we figure out how we meet their expectations of us? And for me, bundling is one of those reasons of why we would want to think about providing services in a different kind of way, in a less than siloed way. This is one of our grads as well, and when we were getting started with CNM Connect, we were trying to figure out how we talk with folks about what our work really is. And so, you know, this is a pretty common question that students ask, how do I drop a class? And what we found is that depending on where they went, they would get very different answers. And so if the student went to our enrollment services office, they would give a very functional answer about logging into our system and how to functionally drop a class, which is completely accurate information. Our financial aid office might talk about a scholarship and how the scholarship might be impacted. We have a statewide lottery scholarship available to our students who graduate from high school, and so dropping a class definitely impacts this lottery scholarship. The student might ask their faculty member, hey, how do I drop a class? And the faculty member might say, you know, you're only behind on one assignment and you can pass this class easily. Again, another accurate information. And our academic advisement office might talk about how dropping a class will impact their graduation date. And so what's important for us to think about is that each of these answers is correct. And a student will go to any one of these places assuming that they're getting a correct answer, and they are getting a correct answer. But when you put all of these answers together holistically for a student, the student might take these answers and realize that dropping a class isn't what they need to do in this particular instance. And so bundling, again, allows us to think about roles and responsibilities and service delivery in a very different way than what we often do in community colleges. And so for me, this helps me think about our students and how we meet their expectations about the services that we provide. So how do we do this thing called bundling? There's typically 3 different ways that bundling occurs. One is through the design of the work that you do, either by developing processes or specific programs or inserting into a process or program you already have in place. It also happens through staffing, and so looking at your staffing model and how you utilize your staff in a variety of different ways. And then the last way is through technology. And so what I'm going to do is talk through each one of these. The first one is around design. And so if you don't mind taking a pen, maybe a piece of paper or sticky note that you have on your desk, and I want you to think about what processes in your institution exist right now that make sense to naturally embed a mix of services. And so I like to think about services that really all students have to touch. So maybe it's orientation that every student has to do. Maybe it's through your admissions process that, again, every student has to do. Maybe it's a core academic course that is required for all students. So I want you to think about those processes where there's an opportunity at your institution to embed another kind of service there. And the thing that I love about this particular strategy is that it's really sustainable. It's not about hiring a bunch of new people. It's not necessarily about developing a new program. It's often pretty easy to embed in an already existing process. And my sense is that we do this really regularly at community colleges all the time. We think about a new and better way of serving our students, and we typically do that. And with this work, the institutionalization is the piece that I'm most excited about. And so to give an example, a pretty easy example, we have an emergency scholarship program here at our institution, and our foundation office was getting a little bit worried because we were utilizing those funds for things that students could actually access through community resources. So maybe we had a student that was hungry and they were asking for funds for emergency food. And so we knew that student, the funds that we were giving them for food were going to help at that moment, but it wasn't going to take care of the long-term food insecurity need for the students. And so we looked at students who'd apply for that money and thinking about that we probably want them to look at applying for food stamps. We probably want to look at having them working with them on a family budget to see how much income they have coming in and what their expenses look like, and really how much money they have that they could allocate each month for food. And also looking at potentially connecting students to food banks or maybe employment. And so our scholarship office didn't have the time to really provide those additional services to applicants for this emergency scholarship. And so what we did is just embed one step in the process that students get a letter of recommendation from an achievement coach that's part of CNM Connect or one of the other achievement coaches through the college. And while this requires students an additional step, a letter of recommendation, which, in terms of scholarship, students are familiar with having to get letters of recommendation, really the letter of recommendation step is about meeting with the coach to connect that student with any other resources that they may need to be successful at the institution and that may be able to supplement the original request for that emergency fund. So we didn't hire new people. We didn't actually need funds to be able to implement this piece of a way for us to connect the academic portion of this work with the income and work support function. So we were able to connect those fairly easily through this process. Another design example that we have at the college that I'm super excited about is the performance-based scholarship we have at CNM called the Milestone Scholarship. If you're interested in doing some additional research about performance-based scholarships, MDRC has some really lovely research out there about performance-based scholarships. And for us, we wanted a way to encourage students to engage in proven academic behavior. So we know the things that students typically need to do to be successful. And so we tried to figure out what are ways that we embed those and make those mandatory for our students in a way that they would be really excited about participating in those. And so we developed this scholarship, and each semester there are several outcomes that the student is required to meet in order to receive the scholarship. And in our program, students receive the funds after they've completed the term and after they've completed those outcomes. So it's a scholarship that comes after the completion. And our foundation board was interested in developing the scholarship, and they had a desire to have high expectations for our students, and they wanted to see an increased GPA over terms. So students have to start out with a 2.5 their first semester, a 2.75 their second semester, and a 3.0 their third semester. It's not a cumulative GPA because we didn't want to make it impossible for students if they had started out with a lower GPA, but it's a term-by-term GPA increase. We build in that they have to meet with a coach, so retention research shows that when someone has a relationship with someone on campus, they're more likely to stick around. So we knew that that research existed, and so we built that into the scholarship that they're required to meet with a coach 2 times a semester. We require that they complete a FAFSA form. Again, for us, that's connected back to our internal research about why our students drop out, and a majority of them drop out for financial reasons. And the FAFSA form is sort of that entry point for many students at accessing federal, state, and also internal financial aid resources. If for some reason a student can't complete a FAFSA form, so for example, an undocumented student, as long as we are aware of that, we will waive that particular element in the scholarship. They have to maintain satisfactory academic progress, which is a financial aid term that shows that they're doing a good job, that they're continuing in the courses that they're supposed to be taking, and they're passing at a rate that seems to make sense. We're asking them to attend full-time. In past semesters, or past years, we've done both full-time and part-time. But as we look at internally our wanting to encourage students to move through the degree process more quickly and the time to degree, we're encouraging students in this particular scholarship to attend full-time. We have embedded a family budget as part of this scholarship, so students have to work on a family budget and complete a family budget for one of the semesters. We want them to do a degree audit to just see where they're at in their degree program as part of the process. We have a success plan that we utilize with students, and so one semester they work with their coach on completing the success plan. And in some semesters, we're not doing it this particular year, we've embedded benefit screening as one of the required outcomes for this scholarship. And so this gave us a way to embed both the academic piece of the bundle, the income and work supports piece of the bundle, as well as the asset building piece of the bundle into one program, so that students didn't, we don't advertise, hey, come on by CNM Connect and we'll bundle some services for you. But we did build a process that purposefully and intentionally pulled these pieces of our theory of change into a format that really made sense to students and in a language that made sense to the students as well. The other way to bundle students, to bundle services, is to look at your staffing model. And so again, I'm going to ask you with that pen and paper to think about the staffing that you currently have, who could maybe provide services in more than one arena. They may need additional training. We may need to provide them different kinds of access. But which staff out there potentially could do that? And then what staffing is potentially comfortable in being cross-trained? So who are your staff who've really been wanting to do more in other areas, but we've been kind of holding back for sort of a variety of reasons? And then what departments in your school exist to purposely sort of step out of the internally created silos? So we create silos as a way, and departments as a way to understand who's responsible for what at the institution. And our students, they don't really see those departments, and they don't really see those lines and divisions of how we divide up who's responsible for what services. It often confuses them and makes them frustrated when we say, that's not my responsibility. It's someone else's responsibility. So just think about that and maybe write down a couple of areas at your institution that that you could have some opportunities for bundling services through staffing. So in our, went too far. In our example at CNM, there are sort of two employee groups that I would like to talk about that we have utilized differently. I want to talk about our student techs first. When I started at CNM probably about 13 years ago, we had levels of student technicians. We had a student tech 1, a student tech 2, and a student tech 3. These were primarily employees that worked in student services, and in our admissions office, for example, each one of those positions had a specific role. And so if a student went to a student tech 1 with a student tech 3 question, we would actually refer them to a different person in that same area. And so we were really siloed even within a position title about what a particular person could do. And so what we did is we took that position and we changed the job descriptions for all of those employees, so they're now all just student techs. And we were able to raise the salary, look at the job description, and change their job duties to roll up to the highest level, the student tech 3, so that students could, whenever they showed up at admissions, whoever they talked to would be able to support them in whatever they needed to do. It meant that we had to work on job descriptions. It meant that we had to work on job training. It also meant that it impacted our budget around pay. But it meant that our students who showed up got the services that they needed when they needed it. We also use this same position. We have multiple campuses here in the Albuquerque area. And at some of the campuses, we don't have, they're small enough that we can't have one representative from each student services office. And so we were able to do cross-training with these student technicians so that they can do admissions functions, they can do assessment functions, they can do some of our parking functions. I'm trying to think. They help with our IDs. And so it allowed us to actually provide, to allow them to provide services across several departments. And so while that doesn't connect specifically back to WFSN and our 3 core strategies, it does speak to the internal community college experience about how we utilize our staff and how we potentially use them differently. With our achievement coaches, they are generalists, and they are crossing and providing services in all 3 of those areas. There are organizations that hire people that specialize in each one of those areas, and I've seen that work really well, like CNM's model as well. For us, the generalists give us some flexibility around the kinds of roles that our achievement coaches can have. So they definitely work with students on academic issues. They work with students on financial aid issues. They work with them on budgets. We do have an individual development account so we can program, so we can connect them with a match savings account. Our coaches do taxes. They do benefit screening. They do a little bit of a lot of things. And so we have given them permission and, in fact, encouraged them to provide holistic support and services to our students. There are staff members out there that are really excited about being able to do that. It's not a job for everybody, so some people really like clearly defined roles. And our achievement coaches, they do a little bit of a lot of different things, and so you want to have the right kind of personality to do that. And what's been important for us is really making sure that we have ongoing cross-training. And so we've found that, for example, there are often changes in our financial aid world, and that we want to make sure that our coaches are up to date on those changes in financial aid. We've provided all of our coaches training in financial coaching so that they've had practice in talking about finances and in asset building. Again, I talked about financial aid. They do tax preparation. Today is our first day of tax prep training for community members and staff. We do training around academic preparedness models, and then also helping to connect them with training around the resources available in the community. And the last way to really bundle services is around technology. So I want you to think about at your own institution how you might be able to use technology to support bundled services. And for CNM, I would say that this is an area that we have used as a support functionality, not necessarily as a core strategy around bundling. So it's been more of a way for us to support our bundling services. So one of the things that we realized that we needed is if we wanted our coaches to be able to provide more services with financial aid, they actually didn't have access to see those screens in our data system. We use Banner as our data system. And so the financial aid screens were screens that we didn't have access to. And so for many years when a student came in and wanted to know their completion rate, I would actually calculate it. And so several years ago we got our coaches access to the screen that calculates it automatically for our coaches. And so it meant that they needed training on what those screens meant. It also meant that we needed to provide them training to know at what point should they make that referral to financial aid so that someone who had a deeper knowledge base could answer more detailed questions. This past year, we also implemented a module in Banner called the Student Support Module. It's actually a module that we've owned for many years, but didn't actually know we had. And in the module, we are tracking all of the services that we provide to our students, and we're tracking them across multiple departments. So what we found at our institution is that we didn't really have a really great customer relations management system. So a student could go downstairs to admissions and get help and get referred to academic advisement for something. The student would come up to academic advisement but not know why they were referred, and we would have this sort of game where we would send people back and forth because we weren't communicating with each other about why the student was being referred. And so this data system allows us to communicate across departments about what happened in each department so that we can look at that before working with a student. My favorite story is that students would say, the lady downstairs with the dark curly hair sent me up here. And so we'd have to kind of think through who that could potentially be, call that person up if we could figure out who it was, to get some additional information about the student if the student didn't know why the referral had been made. So the communication piece of this is something that I am super excited about with this particular module. And then the other piece is it allows us to track outcomes across different departments. And you know, probably 2 years from now, we'll be able to look at, you know, how much intervention does it really take to get a community college student through our system? You know, how many interactions does it take to get from the point that a student says, I want to go to college, till they're sitting in their first class? And my sense is that it's way more than we would ever imagine in terms of all of those contacts that it takes. But before the student support module, we really didn't have a way of tracking how much that was, what that effort was, and then to see how we could support one another across departments in that. And then the last thing around technology is to think about some data sharing agreements with maybe institutions that we don't typically share data with. And so when I was at the class conference 2 weeks ago, thinking about, you know, is there a way for us to do data sharing with our human services departments to find out which of our students are receiving food stamps and would probably be likely candidates to be eligible for other forms of financial aid, so we could do a cross-check and see to make sure that those students had completed a FAFSA form. We could also look at data from like workforce solutions kinds of offices and look at unemployment income data to see if our intervention of helping students get a degree or certificate actually does help them increase their annual income And with UI data, that's something that we could potentially do, is to look at, how much were families making before they came to community college, and then how much are they making after they've completed a community college track. So those are, I wouldn't say the data sharing agreements are necessarily easy, but they do have the potential for allowing us to have some significant impact in our work. And so those are 3 areas that I think help us think about, A, are we really bundling services, and does our data really show that we're doing that? And B, looking at places and institutions where we could compare about some of those different chunks of services. So the data sharing agreement with like an income support division allows us to see which of our students are receiving income and work supports, as well as attending the college, and then thinking about what kinds of strategies make sense for that particular group of students. And I think you all have done a lot of work thinking about data and how your data supports the work that you're doing, and so I'm excited to see in some of your plans what that might look like and what you all are thinking about. And so I wanted to pause for questions.
Great, thanks, Ann Lyn. So there are 2 different ways that attendees can ask questions. You can either type in a question and send it over to us, or I'd strongly encourage you to just raise your hand. We have a small enough group that it'll be easy to just unmute a line and just talk directly to Ann Lyn. So please submit your questions or raise your hand, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more. So the first question I guess I'd like to ask is just, what are some of the key challenges that CNM faced when trying to bundle services, and what suggestions do you have for the colleges, who are getting ready to begin implementing their services?
Well, I think thinking about the staffing piece, I think it's important. So let me back up. One of the challenges we faced was trying to bundle too many things too quickly. So how do you add in things at a rate that staff can really be able to absorb those changes in a meaningful way? And so that would be a piece that I would look at, is to go, okay, if we're going to change staff roles, which staff, how quickly, how much, and to really have the staff that are impacted be able to help weigh in about the pieces that they really feel like they have some expertise around, and that they can really do in a high quality kind of way. So for us, we had a hard time, honestly, with incorporating benefits access. It was a challenge for us. And sort of the fail that I made as a manager was trying to have them really learn and do benefit screening for multiple benefits. So we were able to screen for about 18 different benefits, and that was too much for our staff members. So if I had to do that piece over again, I probably would have said, let's do training on food stamps, get really clear about food stamps as an entry benefit, and then look at pulling in other benefits as we move through. So that would be the one piece around staffing, is to think about how quickly and how much change really makes sense for an employee group. And the other thing in terms of a challenge is to think about the kinds of training that folks need to be able to do some new things, because for many institutions, bundling is a different way of providing services. And so I think it's important that people have really high quality, adequate training, and that it's ongoing would be the other thing to think about as a challenge.
Great, thank you. Kind of along the similar lines of advice is, what kind of just general pieces of advice would you have for the colleges about you know, how they approach implementing the strategy, maybe not just specifically to bundling, but just because you have such great expertise with the strategy overall. Any advice that you could give to colleges as they're getting started now?
Sure. I was thinking about bundling in terms of advice, and I would pick something easy. I would really look for places where the bundle that you create is really easy for students, is really easy for staff, and can be embedded in an existing process, so that you don't have to create something new. You don't have to brand a new program or do anything like that. So I guess my advice is to look for the really easy ways to do really great work, because you're already doing lots of really great work. And so that would be what I would think about, is think about this less as creating a new program, a new WFSN at your center, at your schools, but think more about embedding it in existing work that's going really well, and to look for the champions in your institutions that are really excited about bridging some of our own internal silos, and maybe are interested in sort of chopping down some of those silos, because the institutional change work, it's long and it's hard, and there are days when it feels really painful to me. And so finding those really easy wins, I think, is a good thing to do. And the other thing I would think about, just in terms of bundling, is I probably don't talk to my staff about bundling other than kind of their first week. I talk about our theory of change and what that change looks like, and I talk about the data of students who've received 3 out of the 3 core services and how much more likely they are to succeed. But the language of bundling is language that doesn't really land very well with students. And so it's not on any of our Connect promotional brochures. It is fully in our theory of change, and so I want to make sure that our staff really understand what that looks like and how we do it. But it's probably not part of our promotional materials at all. So, so my advice would be, use language that lands with your students and with your staff, and look for places that that are, again, really easy to embed and to institutionalize in very meaningful ways.
Hi, Ann Lyn. This is Julian. I had a quick question for you, just with regard to what you've learned over the years in terms of kind of what you initially thought may have been likely services to be bundled versus what, in fact, you've learned have been actually the services that become bundled. So I guess to clarify my question, if for the colleges on the call, if they think that, yes, we know that we think that students who typically receive services around public benefits access, they also will likely need a service to be bundled regarding financial coaching. So that's one maybe clear area where services could be bundled. So I'm just wondering what assumptions were challenged for you about what services your students need, and what you've learned over time, what in fact the services that they need to be bundled, their themes that have emerged in the work that you've done.
Yeah. You know, the one place that people really want to try to do a bundle is during tax time, and so and in the WFSN bundle, this actually isn't a bundle, it's the same core services, but connecting tax preparation to benefit screening. So I think that one is hard because people go to tax time to get their taxes done, and that's why they're there. And kind of thinking about another thing is more challenging. We've also had folks who are interested in doing kind of financial ed connected to tax time as sort of a separate kind of piece, and that it works if you embed it as part of the explanation of the tax process. My sense is most of us don't understand the tax code at all, and that really understanding like why someone gets a refund or owes is sort of a complicated kind of thing. And this is especially true for people that have small businesses, that really understanding how do you do just good basic business records for small business owners, I think is a place that there is some leverage there, but that's also a hard one. The place that I had a big fail was I tried to embed financial coaching with financial education. So we had students that were taking a course, and I wanted to use the behavioral economics principle of that everybody would get it, and you had to opt out versus opt in. And that didn't work super well because of our sort of foundational belief in colleges that there is academic freedom in those courses, and so I couldn't actually embed a service in a college course, which I think on the surface sounds crazy good, but in implementation was difficult. One of the unlikely bundles that I've seen, but I think is lovely, comes out of Arkansas, and if this school is on the call, I'm giving you guys super credit. I talk about you all the time. Is looking at embedding financial education in an English course, because at that institution, every student took 1 and 2 English courses, and so they embedded their financial education in the English course. And it just, to me, it was this really lovely thing because they already had staff who were doing it, right? So there were English teachers already assigned. It was a place that had a contact with every single student. And it was embedding something that's really critical in a way so that all students could get that. And so really the investment was training those faculty members in these additional financial education models. And I'm blanking on the school in Arkansas's name right now, so I'm sorry about that. But I thought it was a really lovely, it was sort of an unlikely bundle, but one that worked really, really well for them.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I want to encourage people on the webinar to send in questions. I know you must have questions because some of the questions Julian and I get asked, I think, would be greatly answered by Ann Lyn. So please don't be shy. If you prefer not to talk to us, you can type them in, and I'm happy to read it. Ginger Clark, I believe you have your hand raised, but I cannot unmute your line because I don't know if your audio has not been typed in, but if you want to type in the question, I'm happy to read it to the whole group and have Ann Lyn respond.
Hey, Lisa, do you mind forwarding my to the next slide? I don't seem to be able to do that anymore.
Sure.
Ann Lyn, can you hear us now? This is Patrick Henry.
Hi. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, this is Christy, and I just have a couple of questions I wanted to follow up about what Julian's last question was. One is, if we did embed something in SDV 108, financial literacy, and we also offer them financial coaching one-on-one, are we not to bundle that because it's in the same pillar? I just want to make sure I'm accurate.
So, yeah, Julian, do you want to answer that?
Sure. And so the intent that, as we've kind of promoted for WFSN, is to bundle across the 3 core pillars. This is not to say that we discourage you from identifying bundles within the services provided with kind of vertically in each pillar. But in terms of for the WFSN strategy, we'd like to see bundling across. But again, Christy, to your question, we don't want to discourage you at all from, to the extent you're identifying some natural services to be bundled within one pillar, to not do that, but also to kind of work toward bundling across.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, on any of the services provided, does anyone have any recommendations on maybe a requirement that they expect from the student in order to receive these services? For example, if they were receiving a child care subsidy and it was just an emergency supplemental subsidy, do they require that that student does these things in order to receive that service. And I know sometimes they need the service immediately, so I was just trying to get some ideas of what people may do in that situation.
So this is Ann Lyn, and the thing that has worked really well for us is for students, the language of scholarships and their specific requirements for scholarships is really, they get it. It's a language that they get, and so requiring someone to do something for some kind of aid, whether or not that's emergency or performance-based or need-based, students really get. And so, in the last 10 years or so, I've seen students do all kinds of things for as little as $10. So the challenge for you all is to think about, what do you really want them to do? And to reward or to require the behavior that you really want. So if, for example, you wanted to do something around credit reports, you could incentivize pulling the credit report, or you could incentivize some sort of worksheet around an analysis of reviewing their credit report. So, like, at what level do you want to encourage the behavior? And so I think that gives you all this chance to go, okay, well, we want this one behavior, but if we went a step further, that's actually the outcome that we want for them. The other one is a step to the outcome. And so to get kind of clear about, do you want them to do the step or do you want the actual outcome? And you can ask for any of those kinds of things as that you build in programmatically as part of the work that you do. The other thing I would say about scholarships in terms of encouraging staff members, because there were times when there were things that I would ask staff members to do that they were reluctant to do, is that if you put it in a scholarship and the student shows up saying, will you help me put together a family budget, and it's a staff member that's been a little reluctant to do that before, they're going to do it because they care about students, and that's usually sort of the motivation for many of our staff members. And so it's sort of a backdoor way to get staff members to do services that maybe you haven't been able to get them to do before.
Ann Lyn, this is Julian again. While we have you on the phone, I just want to, if you could talk just a little bit about, I believe they're still called are they called student achievement coaches that you work with at Central New Mexico? And are they, if I understand correctly, they're kind of a cross-section of both student services and academic services kind of expertise? Can you talk about how, I guess, the background or the silo busting kind of embodied in the student career coaches or the student achievement coaches has really helped facilitate bundling, recognition, and awareness about the services that are available and how to kind of sequence them in a way that's beneficial for the students?
Sure. So we've had achievement coaches at the college for about 20 years, and they are super well known as being an employee group that gets stuff done. We have, so for example, there's information about achievement coaches in all of our master syllabi. So on the first day of school, there's information that goes out about them, and teachers talk about them as part of their orientation process to their classes. They're typically a master's or bachelor's level person. They typically have a background in either counseling or social work or education. And they get training in sort of all areas of student services work as part of their orientation process. And we've had to do work with different departments so that they can learn that we're trustworthy, and that takes time. So we've done a project with each department, and as they've seen that we won't give out information that's inaccurate, and that we will refer back in places where someone else should be doing that work, we do. And so we have really lovely relationships kind of across the board, and they have access, again, to information in Banner that they might not normally have. And so The coaches themselves are sort of little bundling machines in that students show up with the problem. The problems that students have, they cross these three areas all the time. But it's a little bit of a shift in thinking about a service. So if you meet with a student one time and you have a conversation in half an hour, you can actually, in that half-an-hour conversation, really easily touch or provide services in all three of those core areas. So the example about how do I drop a class, that's an academic question, so that's the academic section. But dropping a class impacts financial aid, which is that income and work supports question. And having the student think through a family budget about whether or not it makes more sense for them to drop the class and work more hours or keep the class and keep the financial aid, that's an asset building, a financial education asset building moment. So a question as simple as how do I drop a class actually hits all three core service areas very, very quickly. And so the shift for employees is to realize that the outcomes they're getting are broader than just one piece. And that does take time to kind of think through that it's about outcomes and not services, because we spend a lot of time in terms of data collection looking at outputs versus outcomes. And the coaches, they embody that, and we use coaching as the mechanism to make that happen. But they have created really great relationships across the college so that when they need help, they can go to those folks, but also in reverse, when folks in other departments need help, they know that a coach will be able to support them in that. So it's an employee group as generalists that really do bundling at, fundamentally as the work that they do, that we've purposely spent some time building relationships with other people and having a job description that says, you really can do things in any of these areas, and in fact we encourage that. So we don't hand out like jackhammers whenever we hire these folks, but part of what they're doing is one person at a time busting down the silos around what do we think an employee can do to support a student and whose role is that. And so part of that is hiring really good people so they know the places that they can have an impact successfully, and to have really good boundaries around the places of things that they can do and things that they maybe shouldn't do.
Great, thank you.
So I haven't received any additional questions, but Ann Lyn, are there any questions you'd like to ask the attendees, perhaps?
Well, I actually have that question on the screen right now, which is, I'm wondering if a couple of you would be willing to share a really easy bundle that you've been thinking about implementing in the next year. So I'm looking for crazy easy and but super fabulous.
Great. So everyone should be able to answer this question because we have your draft implementation plan. So please raise your hand if you're brave enough to share with the group. We don't bite. Patrick Henry, you're unmuted again.
Well, we actually are going to do the tax preparation coming up for our students, and we have United Way, a strong partnership with them. In addition to that, we can bundle any of our other services because we're doing our SDV 108, which everyone takes for financial literacy, and then the tax preparation is just one intentional bundle that we're going to work on this year.
Great. The other thing I love about what you just described is knowing what are the services that you actually maybe don't have the capacity to do, but you have a really great partner who can do that. And tax prep is a great place that sometimes having someone else do that is a great thing to do. So what a great example. Thank you.
Does someone from either the Arkansas Consortium or the Washington Consortium want to share? And a big thank you to Patrick Henry for being so active and participating today. We appreciate it.
while we wait, I just want to, just Julian again, I just want to kind of emphasize some of the things that Ann Lyn has mentioned, and I think it really is. It's not forcing yourself to reinvent the wheel, but kind of recognizing some of the natural ways that you can bundle services that you currently have on your campus, or you want to kind of newly implement as part of your WFSN strategy, and recognizing champions and stakeholders within that can help kind of advance that that goal and advance kind of delivering those services in sequence. And doing so, as Christy mentioned and as Ann Lyn has mentioned, and as we've kind of promoted, doing it with intentionality. So really being thoughtful about how you connect these services, how you align them with the needs of the students, and do it in a thoughtful and intentional way.
Great, thank you. We've had a hand raised, so Kathy, you are unmuted on the line. You might have your phone muted still, though. Well, we can't hear you, but if you want to type. Okay, so Kathy she chatted to us. They're updating a job fair to be a community resource fair with benefits access.
Oh, cool.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Kathy, do you mind if I steal that idea?
She said feel free, and she said it's an exciting fair, or it's an existing fair that's very popular, so they're adding the benefits access component. So I think that's a great idea. Oh, and they wholly support plagiarism, so other colleges that are interested, feel free to steal.
So the thing I love about that is that, what you described, Kathy, via IM is an event that was already in place, that you all were already doing, and so connecting employment to the income and work supports by, inviting some community resource folks is really great. And I don't know if you all have had this, but I've had folks come talk to me about helping get our students to apply for health insurance, because that deadline is through, I think, February 15th. And so, again, that would be something that you don't actually have to train your employees to do, that you could have someone else in the community come out and do that work for you all, and still be able to think about what that bundle looks like. You'd be able to count it as part of WFSN, and you'd be providing a really lovely service to students without having to scale up that piece necessarily. So the next slide I have, Elisa, is my contact information. So as you all are moving through your work, if there's anything that I can do to support your work, feel free to reach out to me. Email is the best way to get a hold of me, which is why I put my email address up there. We've been doing this work for a while, which means we've made a lot of mistakes, and there have been things that we've done that worked really well and a lot of things that didn't go well at all. But I'd be happy to share things that didn't work as well as things that did. And I just want to wish you all lots of great luck as you move forward. This work to me is really critical work as we think about how we support a group of people who have made the choice to transform their lives and transform their families' lives, and to be a part of an institution that really has the power to make that kind of transformation happen is the reason that I get up and come to work every morning. So I love that I get to do it with colleagues like you all. So thank you for giving me a chance to talk about bundling today. I hope it was useful information just in terms of thinking about the places that we bundle, either it being implementing at in some level in a process at the college, using staffing as a second way to do that, or utilizing technology as a way. And again, think about those ways that you can do this in really easy formats.
Great, thank you, Ann Lyn. We appreciate you sharing with us and being a resource for these colleges. And so I strongly encourage colleges to reach out to Ann Lyn if you have any questions. And then just before I let you all go, just want to plug our next webinar. It'll be a week from today. From 1 to 2:30 Eastern Time, you'll be hearing from the Institute for Women's Policy Research, and a registration link is coming to your email very soon. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.